This is the Franchise QB Podcast, where we empower entrepreneurs to win big in franchising. We huddle up weekly to educate our audience about the most successful small business model ever created, franchising.
Welcome to the Franchise QB Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Halpern, a 20-year industry veteran and entrepreneur. My mission is for listeners to achieve their American dreams of creating wealth and independence through franchise ownership. Every week, we speak with franchisees, franchisors, or vendors that support the industry. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. Joining us in the huddle today are Frank and Kacie Radochonski of Pop's Beef. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
It is great to have you both. So let's start with you, Frank. Frank, you're the founder of Pop's Beef, and your daughter Kacie is the VP of Operations. We'll talk to Kacie here in a moment. And your son Frankie is also a multi-unit franchise owner. So you guys are all involved in the family business. So those that are listening that are unfamiliar with your concept, I'll fill them in. So Pop's Beef is a beloved fast casual franchise. Probably wasn't called fast casual back then, but that's our new industry term, that you founded back in 1980. 17 locations across Illinois and Indiana. Pop's Beef has become a go-to for fresh, house-made Italian sausage, beef, and more. The brand is celebrated for its high-quality food and also the strong community connections and family-driven values. So, Frank, take us back to the beginning when you first opened your location back in 1980. How did your initial vision and dedication help shape Pop's Beef into the big success story it is today?
So it's pretty funny you say vision. In all honesty, I had no vision. I was young. I was 23 years old, and I was looking to simply survive. I had worked 5 years previously at a place called Duke's Italian Beef and Sausage. And so I took kind of that same concept and figured that if I was just to work hard, let's just see what happened. But as Kacie sees, well, back then it was me and my mom, two people in that store. And I literally never left. I never left. I was there morning, noon, night. I never left that store for 2 years. So, I think I was lucky. I don't think this is something you teach that, and it's not like I'm floating my own boat, but you have to have a work ethic, And so I think more than anything, I was driven by the fear of failure. Nobody likes to fail. So I was determined, no matter what it took, that I wasn't going to fail. So, and the most important thing that I knew from the very beginning were your customers. So, they were few and far between in the beginning, but as they came in, you talked to them and you kind of got to know them. So I think together with what I was doing, like working hard and getting to know the customers, it kind of evolved from that.
Okay.
So my mom was great help. My mom was unbelievable.
Yeah, I have a tremendous amount of respect for restaurant operators. I know how hard it is to be good at it, and it is not an easy thing to do. Even as a franchise owner, it can be challenging, but to do it from scratch, create your own concept, even if you had the foundation from a previous restaurant, coming up with your own menu and your way of doing business and managing people, it's a lot. So Kacie, let's talk to you for a moment. So the legacy of the business continues through, both Kacie and Frankie. Kacie, you're the VP of Ops, ensuring brands' operational excellence. And as I mentioned, Frankie has multiple franchise locations. You guys are the next generation of the family business. So Kacie, tell us a little bit about growing up in the family business and your current role as VP of Ops.
So very much like my dad's story of never thinking that this was going to be his long life-term plan. I don't think it was ever mine. We have stories from growing up when, my sisters and I, so I'm one of four, me and my brother in the operation, my two sisters, I would always say are smart, chose different career paths. But we would, high school, someone wouldn't show up and dad would, get on the phone and, to my mom, send one of the girls in and we'd all be yelling, I went last time. And so for you to say that this would have been my career path, I don't think I would ever chose it. But now with that being said, Before this, we were a license agreement. So I don't know if you're familiar with, the big differences between licensing agreement between franchising. And so I graduated college in 2008, excuse me. And then in 2010, we became a franchise. So that's kind of when I came on board full time, decided that this is what I wanted to do. And I leaned back and forth the different options, what I wanted to do. But I think the reason that I stayed and I still stay is because of the ties, not only to family, but I think that there's family within our employees. I think there's family within our customers, that relationships my dad have built over the years. And there's a family with our franchisees now that were not franchisees. There were licensing agreements, of course, but not only is that family values instilled within our own family, and that's something that, my dad with integrity has built, but that has become ties, like I said, again, with the customers and with our employees and with other franchisees. And it has created a great work environment, not only, and something to be truly proud of. And it feels like home. And so in instilling that in our franchisees, and I think that is why I stay, because of that. Like I said, that's really something to be proud of.
Yeah, and I want to get to the franchising.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to the franchising aspect of it. I'm curious about like the initial expansion. Frank, did you open a second location, or did you go right to licensing? How did that all look back in the day when you got to store two?
So it's the second store actually was my Uncle Joe. He drove a Mayflower truck, but every time he was in town, he was at the store, whether he was helping slice beef or make jardiniere or something. And then when he got the call or whatever, he'd hit the road again. So in between time, the realtor that had put me in position to own my store, he called me up and says, "Hey, listen, we have a store on 103rd Kacie. Are you interested?" And instantly I called Uncle Joe and I said, "Hey, listen, we got an opportunity." So he says, "I'm in." So that was our second store. And I helped him get started with that. And then we went to a third store, which I did. Okay. So those were the first three stores.
Yeah. So Kacie, tell me a little bit about the licensing. So it sounds like you guys started with a licensing model and then evolved into a franchise model. Can you walk us through, for those listening that may not be familiar with the differences between the two, can you touch on that?
So licensing, I think, has a lot more flexibility in what they can do within the store. One, we don't, for a licensing, you don't collect a royalty, right? You kind of give them, normally you send it, they give you a check and they can use your name, your recipe, and kind of do it like their own mom and pop shop, but just operating under your name, which was kind of cool because, again, going back to things that are still important to us as community. So they can market and advertise the way they wanted to do it. They could run the business they wanted to do it, but of course they'd be using our recipes and our name. And kind of like my dad was saying, Uncle Joe opened the first one, the third one, but it was a friend, a friend wanted to open this, a friend wanted to open that. And so I think we hit 9 stores. Was it 9 stores? Yeah. It was around 9 stores. And it was actually the government came to us and is like, "I don't know what you're doing here, but this is no longer a licensing agreement. You've gotten too big. You're operating as a franchise." And so with the government intervening, we didn't really have a choice. We were backed into a corner. And I think because he could prove that he wasn't collecting royalties and they were truly operating as a licensing agreement, they made a deal saying pretty much if you become a franchise and you kind of follow all the things, we'll, not fine you is what you will. And
there was a small penalty.
Yes, exactly. So that was, we were forced into franchising. And so, yeah, and it's for the greater good, for the
I really appreciate your candor because not a lot of people talk about that, and I think it's really interesting. And there are a lot of differences between the two. And I see licensing models and things like, Nike shoes will be placed in a Dick's Sporting Goods, but they can decide, Dick's can as a licensee, well, this is the part of the store we want to put it in, and this is how we display the shoes, but they can kind of do it the way they want. Whereas in a franchise, they're going to tell you exactly the trade dress, the location, the way of doing business, the way you present the sale, all those things. So they are very different. But I can see how most restaurant brands are going to be at some point at scale going to be converting to a franchise system. So you guys went through that. Did you say it was 2010?
2010, yes.
Okay, cool. So family business, became a licensor, now is a franchisor. Talk about the dynamics of like running a family-owned business. I mean, I'm sure there's challenges, I'm sure there's rewards, but talk about like working within the family unit, but being a franchisor. What's that like?
Well, I'll start off.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the first thing, I think she has gotten better than I have.
And what?
Well, I think you've gotten better too, is she understands that I'm always going to say my piece. Before, I don't think when I started out and say my piece, she was always as accepting as she is now. because I think she sees it's kind of difficult to find that line. But I could remember the day, like she kind of came to me and I says, the one thing we have to do is make sure family remains family.
Yep.
Business remains business. I think we've done a good job.
Yeah. Well, I think, yes, that is something he's always said, when we're at family time is family time and business is business, and you kind of got to keep that separate. And I know this is a kind of layup to the next question of my brother being a franchisee. I don't think he does that as well. And I think that that's why he became a franchisee, and he is a very good franchisee. He has in 2021, he worked for another fast food restaurant before this. And in 2021, he then came full time at our corporate location in 2021. They had a partner in one of our stores that was looking to get out, and so he had stepped in, and it was a great fit. And so I think he has a harder time keeping business and family separate, and I think with him becoming a franchisee, it's become a great dynamic. And he brings something, kind of brings a different side to the family dynamic and gives good advice, right? I mean, he comes up with better ideas.
I wish he would come up with more, because this is what he went to school for.
Yes.
He went for restaurant hospitality management. He actually went to work for hotels, and he worked for another franchise and stuff. So he got the full gamut where, I didn't go to school I didn't go to school. So I've been flying by the seat of my pants the entire time. So looking for the input is great.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting perspective, because sometimes there's a misconception that being a franchise owner means that you have no flexibility in how you run your business. It's super rigid. And obviously there are some big systems, like the Golden Arches, where it's like, hey, it's our way. It's 10,000 units, whatever. But a lot of franchisees, it's their business, right? Yes, they have to operate within the parameters of the franchisor, and there's certain things that they absolutely must do, but it's their business. They can come up with ways, working within the parameters of what's legal and what's acceptable and what's culturally appropriate for the brand, and come up with great ways to build their business. So it's cool that Frankie can kind of do that, and he's still part of the family, but he's on the other side, right? He's a franchise owner. He signed a franchise agreement. So tell me about, how many locations does he currently operate?
3.
He's got 3. Okay. And how did he roll them out? Like, he got the first one. Did he operate that one for a period of time before he opened the second one?
So, like I said, it was an investor that he wanted to get out. And so he kind of stepped into that person's shoes, and then kind of like domino effect. It happened with the second one and happened with the third one. So that investor backed out and he got in. So it was, it wasn't like he was starting from scratch at any of these locations.
These were all acquisitions that were licensees.
Yeah. But he stepped in kind of in the third one.
For one of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yes.
Fully stepped into the third one.
Cool. Yeah. Very cool. So how long has he been a franchise owner? When was that first franchise agreement executed?
2021. So 4 years.
Cool. Last couple of years. Yeah. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, like, you mentioned community before. I know that's at the essence of Pop's Beef. You guys value the community that you operate in. Tell us about your community involvement, local fundraisers, charitable initiatives. What do you guys do that kind of connects with the community?
So when it started as a mom and pop shop, truly, I mean, it was everything from Little League to the library programs, the reader programs. When they read so many books, you'd get gift certificate to churches to gift card programs through churches, through the schools on Halloween. You would send out free hot dogs for all the kids at the schools, a lot of which you can't do anymore. But then looking to grow that on a franchise level, how do you still give back? In a much bigger scale. And so what's been really cool about that, we've partnered now with Red Cross. That's a great, partnership. And then Toys for Tots we do, which is a bigger one. So very much still in the roots from a franchisee level. I think all of our stores are very well connected in their communities. And then on a franchise level, we do, like I said, the Red Cross and the Toys for Tots on, like I said, a bigger scale.
That's really cool. Yeah, it's nice that you can find these organizations that, as you grow into different states and communities, you can still kind of stay true to that same cause. So let's talk a little bit about the menu. I know people want to hear about that. Tell us, what is Pop's Beef for someone that's not from Chicago, not from Illinois, Indiana, that may not have been to your shop. Tell us a little bit about kind of what's on the menu.
Our menu is one of the biggest menus you will find anywhere around.
It's going crazy.
It's gone crazy. And I think that is something we've both talked about, trying to minimize
Rein it in a little bit.
just because of franchising, right? When you look to franchise, it's not easy when your menu, I mean, you look at who is franchising right now, and the best out there, that are opening the most amount of stores they have the simple menus. And so ours is nothing but simple. But anyways, you come and visit one of our restaurants, we have something for everybody. We have, of course, what we're known for, our staples, our beef, our sausage, combo sandwich are delicious with homemade jardiniere. You'll never find a better sandwich. But, and going past that, you have the hot dogs. It's a proprietary item for us, which obviously perfect for kids, chicken nuggets and stuff like that. And then for the lighter eater, you have our chicken. I love a chicken pita, but we have the salads and we have wraps now. A gyro sandwich is delicious, breaded steak. Like I said, I could go on. And then our appetizers, we got everything from cheese curds to onion rings to fries and in between. So, and then milkshakes. Yeah. And then wash it all down with a milkshake.
Don't forget about those milkshakes. Yeah. How about catering? Do you guys do jobs for like offices and other commercial accounts?
You know what? So that's kind of gotten hard because obviously everyone wants the beef, right? Because that's what we're known for. It's delicious. And so in the past couple of years, we've started doing things called grab and goes, which I think it's easier when you're looking at a cold cut sandwich, but ours is a warm sandwich and best served warm and eaten warm. Right. So that's kind of gotten hard on, like you said, corporate level, but definitely Christmas Eve is our busiest day of the year. We do tons of graduations and catering for parties and things like that. But on a corporate level, it's not as easy as it sounds for us. Not to say it hasn't been done before, but it's just...
We've also done weddings.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's tough because you know that your product is best enjoyed fresh and hot. Right. And if you sacrifice the integrity of the product, people aren't going to love it as much, and they may not, rave about it the way they do when they get it in the shop. So I know that's a tricky thing because you want to make people happy, but not at the expense of kind of sacrificing, what's good about the brand.
Well, not only that, your best source of marketing advertising is word of mouth. And so kind of like you said, if they don't have a great experience, and it wasn't kind of our fault because they didn't get it from our store, they got it at a party or, whatever it is. Then.
And we clearly do it.
Yeah.
We make sure that what you want is what you're going to get.
Yes. Yep. It's not
awesome. I don't want there to be any misconceptions, especially, let's say for the wedding. I says, I want to talk to the mom and the bride before we're going to do any type of a wedding thing.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So let's talk a little bit about where you're positioned in the fast casual segment. Fast casual, for those that are unfamiliar, you go to the counter, you place the order. In some cases, you have a runner that brings out the food. In some cases, you wait and get the food. It's one of the most popular, probably neck and neck with just fast food QSR in terms of growth. So tell us, how do you guys stay competitive in that space and still preserve your family-oriented values?
I think because we are so flexible. And what I mean about flexible is we are not your cookie cutter franchise. We have restaurants and gas stations. We actually just opened a restaurant that's drive-through only. You can't even walk in. Our corporate location is carry out only. So we don't have drive-through. We don't have seating in ours. So we are very, very flexible to any market that, wants to have us in that. And so in addition to that, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with the menu. We have something for everybody, whether it's, your big eaters, your light eaters, your kids. And I think community involvement, I think that's been huge too.
We do have the full service where we do have dine in, we do have carry out, we do it all. And we depend on the DoorDash and
absolutely.
Grubhub for deliveries.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I think the something for everyone. I used to work with a client called Paisano's Pizza here in the DC market, and they were really great at having a menu that a lot of their competitors couldn't touch because they did so much in the shop, and it was very complex, but that was what differentiated them from the next guy, is that, like, if you want, a pizza, you can get a pizza, but if you want something that's hot, something that's cold, it was all there for you. So it sounds like, yes, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to execute, but at the same time, that kind of is your competitive moat that is different than what the next guy can do, because you guys have it figured out, been doing it for a while. So tell me a little bit about, a franchise owner. I know they come in all shapes and sizes, but what qualities do you guys seek in a new owner that you feel can be real successful with Pop's Beef?
I will say, first and foremost, it has to be a good fit. It has to be a right fit. We've learned a lot over the years of the guy that comes in that just truly wants to be an investor, or the guy that comes in that doesn't really want to work the store, and it's not going to be familiar and tries to put just anybody in place to run that operation. Like we said, it's not our brand is not an easy, cookie cutter brand that you could throw anybody in. And so I would say first and foremost, it'd be somebody that does want to work in the restaurant industry, not so much just, like I said, an investor.
Well, we have worked with investors too, where we want to meet the manager.
Yes.
The person that's going to be running the store. That's the most important position there could be.
Yeah. So it's good if they have capital, because without that, there's no project. But there has to be someone that has the chops that's going to be, running the operation, because without that, it's going to be really difficult to stay open,
Well, and not only that, I think it's important for them to have skin in the game, whatever that looks like, right? So if you just get kind of anybody in there, and like I said, it usually doesn't work out.
You're right. Depends on the people in there. If you have the right people, that's going to make it.
Yep. Yeah. You guys are in the people business, and that starts from the top down, not only on the franchise side, but in the store level operations. So let's talk about item 7. How much does it cost to get into a Pop's Beef? I know there's going to be a variance because you have a few different footprints, different sizes, going to have different conditions of the space, but give us like a range of what it would cost to open up a Pop's Beef franchise.
So unfortunately, that range is so wide, right? Because we do have people that rent their space, right? And they get in these small footprints, and we have people that buy, obviously, the property, which then you're looking at a much higher number. I think in our FDD, we say anywhere between $500,000 and 1.4, 1.5. I mean, like I said, I know that's a $1 million range.
I think that 1.5 and up are the ones that buy the property.
Right.
So that includes your property and building and stuff. And if you're going to build, it's just crazy money.
Right. Well, and that number is obviously with everything in the economy, everything's gotten so expensive to build, and our equipment. Something we pride ourselves in. We don't come from a commissary. Each store cooks and slices their beef fresh daily, and that's why our product is such a great product. So the equipment that goes behind the slicers and the equipment to actually slice that beef is not cheap either. And so it is a big investment. And kind of like you were saying, you got to have an investor. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. So are you comfortable if the right capital's there and they have a commitment to kind of bring the right GMs to the table to run the shops? Can someone come in and say, hey, I want to buy St. Louis and I want to be the only one there, and kind of lock down 5 locations or 10 locations or something like that? Is that possible within your model?
So yes, it is, but we'll start with your first one. Before we would sign any contracts and saying, yes, you can have that whole area, we need you to open one and see if it runs properly and kind of follows our guidelines and what that would look like. Because, you get someone to lock down an area and their first one's a flop, then what, right?
Yep. Or they won't put the time, the effort, and have the wrong manager. You don't want to be
stuck. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then how many franchise owners do you currently have in the system?
Well, that's good.
That's a great question. 10? So it's really interesting talking about family. Two of our franchisees are families, and so one is 3 brothers that own a set of stores. They each have their own stores, and then another one is he's a great guy, but Vince, he's got 10 kids, 10 kids, and 4 of his children. And they're in it in some different capacity. So it's really cool to see that his kids are franchising.
One was a CPA, a young out of college CPA and stuff. And, he says, forget the CPA. And he went into this. And I'm like, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Roll up your sleeves and get into the beef business.
We're real honest, because she says I'm our worst enemy, because I want people to know how difficult this really is. It's not like you're walking up to a vending machine and you put a quarter in and you get a sandwich or a Coke or something. It's just a tremendous, tremendous amount of sacrifice that you have to make. Whether it be, your time with your family is limited, there were times where, if there's a wedding coming up and I had 2 people calling sick, I'm not shutting the store down. Sure. I'm simply not going to that wedding. Yeah. So,
when I think people forget restaurants, it's 7 days a week for the most part. I mean, early mornings, especially someone's at our store at 5:30 in the morning, slicing, cooking that beef, getting ready for the day. You open the doors at 11, and then of course, we used to close at 10 o'clock at night, and then closing, so you're not home till 11:30, 11, depending on how long it takes to close and how many people you got on your schedule. And then you get it up, you get up the next day and you do it all again, right? So people forget that. They want to sign up in the restaurant thinking, oh, it'd be so much fun, and it's long hours, it's hard work.
Yeah, I mean, for all those reasons you said, I know when I talk to a lot of first-time franchise investors that have never owned a restaurant and they want to get into franchising, I generally advise them to maybe start a little bit smaller with like a service-based model, and then they can graduate to something like restaurants once they really understand entrepreneurship and business ownership and managing a P&L and L and managing people. Because jumping right into what you guys are doing, it is tricky. Now, can it be done? Yes. Have I placed clients in food brands that have been wildly successful and scaled? Of course they have. But I like how you guys are really candid about how hard it is. Like, you don't want to sugarcoat that, because then they'll get in and say, wait a second, I bought a franchise, I paid this big fee, I thought that it was just going to be done for me. It's not like that. You have to run this business. Now you guys give them the blueprint, you give them the menu, you give them the trade dress, the trademarks, all that. But at the end of the day, they got to roll up their sleeves and get it done.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah. So you guys have shared a lot. I mean, you're making me hungry. I'm sure you hear that a lot when you talk about your business. But anything else you want to add to the mix today before we wrap up?
No, I think we hit everything.
Pretty good.
Pretty good, yeah. If you
Awesome.
do come in, please don't make sure you order the beef dry. You got to get it juicy with hot peppers.
Definitely.
First time people coming to order a sandwich, and people will order it with ketchup or mustard or goofy stuff.
Or they'll tell you the sandwich is wet. Where's the mayonnaise?
Yes. They think it's
Like a deli sandwich.
A deli sandwich, and it's not. If you eat it with a fork, that's probably the right way to eat it, because it's so juicy, and that's where all the flavor is. So,
well, when I come in for the first time, I'm definitely going to take the recommendations that you've had and what your team will have, so I get the best experience out of it. I want it drip and wet with tons of hot peppers. That's the way I want it. So, hey, if anyone listening would like to connect with Frank and Kacie and their team to learn more about becoming a Pop's Beef franchise owner, contact me at franchiseqb.com. We're on X at QB I'll get you guys connected. Thank you so much, Frank and Kacie, for taking the time to get in the huddle and talk about Pop's Beef with us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Franchise QB podcast, where you're at the helm of your future as a franchise owner. If you enjoyed the content, please rate the show and recommend it to anyone that might be interested in franchising. Make sure to visit franchiseqb.com to subscribe to my newsletter and for an actionable playbook to go from walk-on to legend in your new business. Follow us on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB and join us every week for a new episode. See you next time.
Visit franchiseqb.com to take the next step of your journey towards wealth, independence, and franchise ownership. And remember, when working for the man gets old, you must do something bold. Thank you for listening.